Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to start. Those who have a headset, can you hear me? Can you raise your hands if you can hear me? Very good. Um, Welcome to this hub session in EU Utility Week. My name is Diederik Peerboom. I'm the Secretary General of T&D Europe, the European voice of the grid technology providers. I'm based in Brussels, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you in Vienna to talk about digitalization. We're going to have a great session addressing the question of the new challenges for network operators, and basically the objective that we're trying to get to is what does an end-to-end real-time system awareness and operation of the system look like. I'm very pleased with a fantastic lineup that we have here today. We have seven experts who are going to give you their views on how that system looks like, on what they see, and I will not be talking much more. I'll be coming back later on as the moderator of this session's Q&A, and I would very much like to welcome our first speaker, our keynote speaker, all the way from Brussels, from the European Commission. It's Ms. Merce Griera y Fisa from DG Connect, the digital department from the European Commission in Brussels, to talk about the European digital platform to facilitate clean energy for all. So give her a warm applause, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to come from Brussels and to talk to you a bit on what we are doing there from an IT point of view that will have an impact on the activities of the energy sector. The title of the presentation is called European Digital Platforms to Facilitate Clean Energy for All. That gives you an idea already that what we are talking is about synergies in between two of the main policies of the European Commission. In one side, the IT policy, that is the digital single market, and the other side, the energy union. When this commission took place, they decided that they wanted to have very concrete priorities and very focused. But at the same time, they said to us, these 10 priorities are not to be seen in isolation. What we want to do is that you build synergies in between these priorities. And what we're talking now is the synergies in between the digital policy and the energy union. What we have done during this commission mainly has been materializing the synergies on the research and innovation framework. That is what we call Horizon 2020. On this, we have been funding many research projects and innovation projects that are at the same time digital and at the same time energy. We have projects on smart grids, we have projects on storage, we have projects on platforms in big data, in artificial intelligence. And for the ones that we don't know the Commission funded activities in research, I will recommend you to visit the EU pavilion that is here. I think it's on the other hall, where there is about 20-25 projects that will give you a flavor of what we have been supporting as synergies in between digital and energy. But that is the past, that is what we have done. For people that follows a bit the political agenda, you know that next year is electoral year. We have elections in May, so the Commission will change, and what we're cooking for the future. Now, for the future, we want to continue with the synergies in research, because we are very happy with the results achieved, and we think we can really even increase the budget that have been devoted to these smart grids, smart cities, having a leg on energy and a leg on digital. But the novelty, if you want, for the next period, is that we want to go not only on research, that is easy, but we want to go to real business. We want to have synergies in between digital and energy touching the real deployment, not only what is done there on the lab. Because on research, you can be very happy to work with some digital companies because it's on the lab. No, what we want to do now is to do that on the real business perspective. For that, we have proposed two new things. One is what we call the Digital Europe program, and the other is what is to extend the Connecting Europe facility, that instead of financing only the lines, the cross-border electricity lines or gas pipelines, now should finance also the services that are on top of that. So that is broadly the new ideas that we are cooking. Let's see the Digital Europe program. The Digital Europe program have this structure, and as you can see, there is three parts that they are mainly technology oriented. We want high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. There is three main blocks that are to be sure, but that is not research, I repeat. That is for you, for the DSOs, to use artificial intelligence to be better incorporating cybersecurity into your normal day-to-day business, or artificial intelligence techniques to better profile clients, I don't know what. It's really business. And then we have two other parts, one that is on skills, because we believe that if we believe what the main people is telling us, that digital will be everywhere, it will be a shortage of digital specialists. So there is a part for advanced skills to ensure that all the companies that want to have these people with these skills will be there. And then what we call digital transformation and interoperability, because if we believe that data will flow from one side to another, we need to ensure interoperability. So that is the Digital Europe program. Now, what we want to do, here I put it a bit an example of some targets or impacts in order to give you an idea that we are not talking about research, but about real deployment. One of our targets is by 2025 to have self-healing cybersecurity systems in all major critical infrastructures. That means in the DSOs and TSOs networks, because you are one of these major critical infrastructures. Self-healing cybersecurity systems. We want to ensure, as I said, that we will have ICT specialists that will move from 8.2 million, more or less today, to 12 million in 2027. So that we want to be sure that every company that needs IT experts, this expertise is available. And we want to have some reference sites where you can test artificial intelligence techniques before putting them on your running system. That is for the Digital Europe. That is our plan. Now, the second thing is the Connecting Europe facility too, because what we want to do, we want to continue funding gas pipelines, and we want to continue funding electricity infrastructures, but as I said to you, what we're proposing now, is to move on what is the services part. So we are not happy that there is the pipelines, the hardware, the pipelines there, but what we want to do is to ensure that there is cross-border trade, that there is cross-border optimization, that data from the different member states flow from one side to another. And we have invented a name, because they are the Commission always invent, we call that operational digital platforms. And what are these operational digital platforms? That are physical or virtual ICT infrastructure that is operating on top of the communication and the electricity infrastructure to support the flow, the storage, the processes, and the analysis of energy data. So instead of I'm building just a pipeline, I have a big cable now in between France and Spain. So what I want to do here is, on top of this big electricity cable, I have there an ICT infrastructure that will allow me to manage that on an intelligent way. Then what we see that these platforms could be, we think that these platforms can be for information sharing. It can be for optimizing the grid in not only at the level of one member state, but in a region. They could be also for facilitating trading and market, and it could be to offer new services. Some examples of these platforms that they are already there, or there are ideas that we have in mind. For instance, what is already existing is the Platform for Cybersecurity, the European Energy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. That is a platform that already exists, that is where the TSOs and the operators report incidents that they have had in relation to cybersecurity. So we think that this platform is a good example of a trans-European information sharing. This information today goes there manually. You are a TSO, you are a DSO, and you say, look, I got an accident of this type. But in the future, that could be automated. And the information where there is an incident in one part of this full grid can be already made aware to the grid of the neighboring countries or in the region. Another example of these platforms could be the concept of virtual power plant that is there, we talk a lot, but transborder. Why I don't have a virtual power plant that needs to be only in Austria, only in Germany? Why I cannot have that transborder? Another example is the XBit platform that was created very recently, that is for the continuous intraday trading. There is 14 member states that they are there and is running since July 2018. This is a platform that exists, is not covering the full Europe, but is another example of these operational digital platforms. Other examples, for instance, on the services side, why we don't have a platform for maintenance? You are very keen, and I know that DSOs and TSOs, one of the big bills is on maintenance, is on keeping the network running and on changing the equipment. You are trusting what the equipment providers, they tell them on their stress test. But why not to put sensors there and to do that in a large scale at European level? And you can detect faults, and you could even go one step further, and you can aggregate purchasing power and to be strong in front then the suppliers of this technology. Why not? That's an idea. Another idea could be a platform on renewable energy. Everybody knows that it will be too much renewable energy, that we don't absorb this renewable energy. Okay, we don't absorb if we look just a small piece of Europe, but if we think larger, maybe we could absorb it. So why we cannot have a platform where the forecast generation is done across the Union, and then energy can flow from one side to another in order to optimize that, or a platform for advanced simulation in order to monitor and predict the evolution of the market. So that the ones that are question mark are a bit ideas that they have come to us during workshops. The ones that they don't have question mark is platforms that already exist today. So, in conclusion, what I want to bring today here to all of you is that yes, DSO-TSO cooperation is very important, but us at the European level we go even one step further, and we think that it could be cooperation across borders. Why the DSO needs to cooperate with his TSO and cannot cooperate with another DSO even if he's in the other side of the border. So we believe that that is a new type of business that can take place. So in conclusion, data management and analytics, yes, will play a very important role in delivering clean energy for all Europeans, but, as always there is a but this process, at our understanding, needs to go beyond the boundaries of a single company. So it's not to do data analytics to profile your clients. That is very easy, that is already done. You need to go one step further. You need to think on big quantities of data from different companies and doing analytics and intelligence on top of that. Then, for that to be a reality, we need also that these cross-border operational digital platforms are put in place. Because if there is not an IT platform where this data can flow from one country to another, even if you have the goodwill to do it, that cannot be done. And third, we think that the European associations will have a new role to play on that. Because who will manage these platforms? So probably the role of this, the I don't know, the T&D, the NSOE, the EDSO will have a role to play on managing these platforms that sure will appear. So more than organizing some courses and organizing some visits to the European Commission, we think that these associations in the future will have an operative role related to these platforms. So the European Commission supports, as I told you, to support and to facilitate this process. Our proposal is now in discussion in the Council and in the Parliament, and what I have to say is much support is needed from your side. So everybody that has contacts at ministerial level or that has contacts at the Parliament level, your support is much needed. For both, for the Digital Europe program, that is the technology side, and for the Connecting Europe facility. And in particular, in the Connecting Europe facility, this concept of operational digital platforms is something strange that needs really some explanations behind. So I count on all of you that we will manage to pass Council and Parliament and to have these programs up and running. That, as it was written in the slides, that is post-2020, that is to spend money from 21 until 27. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask if there's any questions. Very well.
Yeah, I think I quoted.
Wow, that's a good start to our discussions. What I retain is the message, think big, and we need a lot of cooperation, not just among member states and institutions, but also from all of you here. So you thought you had a free lunch by listening here, but you go home with some homework. We'll have some further time for discussion at the end of the session. But are there any immediate questions for clarification that people would like to ask? If so, raise your hand and I'll pass you the microphone. No? It was a crystal clear presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Very good. I'll make some space for you. Very good. So that was the European Commission's view. A lot on the program. So that's good to see. Of course, one of the key questions of the sessions is the role of network operators and their challenges and potential solution. And who better than to give us some guidance on those questions than the head of ETSO for Smart Grids, the European Association in Brussels, Roberto Sangrandi. I'll invite Roberto to come to the stage. He won't have any slides, but we all know him as a good speaker to keep your attention. And I look forward to his remarks. And if you have any questions afterwards, we'll come back to you with an opportunity to do so. Roberto, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And I didn't prepare any presentation because I am a veteran of the Utility Week and of the hub sessions, and I clearly remember that the screen is always lousy. and so it's really a pain in the neck to follow a presentation on such. The screen is sophisticated, nothing wrong about that, but it's anyway too little for the people that are distracted and. So, my name is Roberto Zangrandi. I am the Secretary General with EDSO for Smart Grids. EDSO for Smart Grids is the association gathering 38 of the leading distribution system operators in Europe, EU, plus a couple of observers from outside the EU, Turkey in an intermittent way, and Ukraine noisily joining us. Why I'm specifying this? Because my members do represent over 200 million metering points in Europe, and if you just apply a basic multiplier to that, we estimate that influence the metering on over 350 million inhabitants of the European Union. So we have got, as to say, a big database, the cumulative, that can be interesting to examine in some way. Let me pick up exactly where Marce abandoned her reflections. That is very interesting. She depicted one of the possible evolution of the DSO business and responsibility in identifying that on the cross-border distribution. We are working very much, and we are working hard also with the Cousin DG Energy Directorate in Brussels in order to establish projects that can demonstrate the joint work of distributors cross-border. And we have among our two members of EDSO, and specifically INNOG and NADs, experimental demonstration going on the northwestern border of France, and it involves the smart management of local and neighboring in terms of border grids, especially devoted to the use and monitoring of electrocharging of vehicles. And this is a very successful experiment, and is the starting point of a wider cooperation in terms of smart management of a local grid. So this just to pick up where Marce finished. And this produces for us a couple of additional responsibilities, and I'm jumping now into the topic of data. You know that data between DSOs and TSOs, data ownership, data management has been a vexed question over the past years. Who is going to control it? Should we go for data platforms? I won't enter into what has already been said, explained, and the positions are clear. But what we really fear as DSOs is a data glut that nobody will be able to manage in the medium near future, by the way. Digitalization and data are going hand in hand. You cannot avoid digitalization if you implement smart networks. Digitalization produces an array of different data, and you have to manage that, and you have to assemble, reassemble, structure, destructure the data that are produced in order to use them properly. The additional point is that the data that are so generated entail and contain multiple use and multiple sourcing. And these may produce in the same span of time another phenomenon that can be worrying for the evolution of the market. And it is the secondary trade of the data that are generated, and the business of storage of those data, and the business of the refining and and the mining of the data that have been produced. So there is a value chain behind the data which is totally unexplored as far as the DSOs are concerned, and as far as the utility business as a whole is concerned. So this is why tackling the operative problems that require advanced digitalization to be solved, the only one name that I would mention here is quote-unquote flexibility, and I would add platforms to that word, require a very advanced degree of availability to cooperate among the system operators. And this is why, with the TSOs Association, ENTSO-E, we are actively working on the development of frameworks within which contain the platforms that will handle the flexibility which is required by the new system. I would draw your attention on the fact that both the TSOs and the DSOs contain a word which is the S in the acronyms of both, which is systems. And the systems are often what we tend to neglect and forget, but also a word that often is the Commission that is neglecting and forgetting. So we do not just pump in electricity that has been transformed from high tension into the distribution network, but we manage entire systems. And this management of entire systems is becoming the real job of the DSOs. The job of the DSOs has totally changed, and is totally changing. We used to distribute. We are now connecting, collecting electricity which is produced on the other part of the grid, and we have to correct it. We have to clean it up. We have to standardize that electricity before that electricity reaches a degree of adequacy that makes it suitable to be carried by the DSO lines into the system and beyond, up to the TSOs if needed. And this system management is something that it is not tackled by the aspirational regulation or even by the new piece on the market design. And this is what, as the chairman of EDSO recalled a couple of hours ago in his speech in the plenary session, and this is what requires and produces those 25 billion euro per year investments that the globality of the DSOs are pouring into the European Union economy to keep business going, or to keep your socket fed with the electricity that you need. Correcting, cleaning up, standardizing the electricity requires a total new approach to the system, and this total new approach to the system produces also the need of a further digitalization that exceeds the boundaries of what is currently regulated. I'm looking at a new friend from SEER in the public, but this is another vexed question, is that the regulators should keep up with the advancement of the technology in the grid as it happens, and not ex post. What does it mean? It means that enhanced digitalization produces a sophistication of the grids. And the sophistication of the grids is made through sensors, hyper sensitivity data collection points on the grid, data exchange on the grid that produce very sophisticated grids in some specific areas. So follow me carefully 1 more minute on this. This is going to produce, if we do not tackle it in a holistic way, a great grid divide. What we assume is that in the near to medium future, we shall have hyper-sophisticated grid systems in defined area in many countries that will allow the very advanced and evolutive smart grids, whereas other part of the same country will not enjoy because there is not sufficient demand or sufficient need of such a sophistication. They will just rely on a more traditional grid. It's like what happened in the railway system. You will have high-speed rails somewhere connecting definite point, and then you will have the traditional commuter train system in a more remote area and secondary lines. This is fine. This is changing the market. This is changing the market, but it will also produce a differential in the prices you pay to vector your electricity or to retrieve your electricity. It will be the difference between fiber optics and ADSL. It's the same thing. But as far as electricity is concerned, the divide might be heavier, and that divide may disrupt an approach to the pricing of electricity and to the constructions of the tariff in 28 countries around the European Union. Premium pricing, differentiated market will produce also a financiarization of the electricity trade, to which we are not ready yet. And this is the cumulative amount of the problems that we are reflecting about, and it is going to be the major changer in the approach to the new networks and to the new system requirements that we are going to face. We cannot do this without the cooperation with the TSOs. We cannot do this without the awareness and the cooperation with the consumers and the stakeholders associations. And we cannot do this without the policymakers and the regulators. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for painting the picture from the perspective of the DSOs. Roberto will have to leave us in a little while, so he won't be able to participate in the panel discussion afterwards. So even more so, if you have any pressing questions on something he said, please raise your hand and you'll have an opportunity to do so. Do I see any raised hands?
Not too pressing, please.
No?
Not too pressing.
Again,
Fine.
a very clear presentation.
I've been lucky, or a horribly unclear one. Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Thank you very much, Roberto.
Sorry about this.
Very good. We're moving on. Roberto was talking about the need for cooperation, and we'll now have two people speaking about exactly that, the DSO and TSO cooperation. And I would first like to invite Dr. Tahir Kapetanovic. He's the head of the National Control Center at Power Grid Control. And he'll give some introductory remarks. And I'll ask you to take the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, also from my side. First of all, a little correction. The company is not called Power Grid Control, but it's called Austrian Power Grid, which is the transmission system operator of Austria. And after listening about the policy making and associations in Europe, I'll bring you down to the bottom of the everyday operational practice. And I do it in a strange way. I'll first tell you what do you change and why. And then I'll explain to you, I first tell you what do we exchange, and then I will tell you why do we exchange. Now, in Europe we have since September 2017 a legislation for the system operation. It's called System Operation Guideline, and it replaces a number of rules which we used to call UCT Operation Handbook, different grid codes, etc. I don't want to go through this. There are about almost 200 articles and 70 pages, but there is one article, or there are one set of articles, which is concerning the exchange of data. So let me first explain to you how we will deal with this in Austria and what is the purpose, and then I will tell you why. So these articles 40 to 53, you see down there, there's a Commission regulation 1485 of August 2017. And these data exchange articles, they regulate three stakeholders, three actors. One is the transmission system operators, the second one is the distribution system operators, and the third one is significant grid users. These are the generators, the demand, the generation connected to be it distribution level or transmission level, but significant means in this case significant for the transmission system operation in the first line. Because this guideline here has been designed and entered into force by the European legislator mainly concerning transmission system. However, data exchange, obviously, as we heard already before, is concerning both distribution and transmission. What do we have very shortly in terms of framework? So we have this regulation, and then we have something which has a terrible name. It sounds like dragon, core, yeah? But it's quite harmless. It's key organizational requirements, roles, and responsibilities for the data exchange. The system or the principle of this framework development is after the legislation entered into force. We are just now waiting the approval of European regulators for this core. And this one sets up the real data exchange details. And now let me come to the reason why we do this. About 10 years ago or 12 years ago, in the year 2006, there was a system split of European transmission system on the 4th of November. Most of you who are close to my age, I'm 55, might remember there was a ship traveling to the North Sea in Germany, etc., etc. And then it happened that for different reasons and for insufficient data and information for both network operators involved, transmission network operators, it came to a big split of system. We lost several millions of customers in Europe. But it was not a blackout. It showed the system was robust enough to survive such a disturbance, but it clearly shown that for the operational planning, that time, it was 2006, there is no chance that a single transmission system operator do it on their own. And this was the dawn of today we call them regional security coordinators, service providers of the TSOs. They are the companies we own. We use them to help us fulfill our mission in the operational planning. Particularly APG, Austrian Power Grid, is a shareholder and uses the company called TSC Net in Munich, in Germany. Now, what do these companies do? Basically, they do for the operational planning, which is up to 1 hour before real time, calculate the load flows, do the network security analysis, and some other things which we need to do across the border. The lady from the Commission said just before, we need to look across the border. Now, the European electricity sector has been looking across the border already since 60 or 70 years, but in this particular case, we recognize clearly that we cannot do the planning of operation without involving everybody around us. Just to mention, there are 5 these kind of regional security coordinators in Europe. You can find more about them on the website of ENTSO-E, which is entsoe.eu. So, in order to allow or to enable this company to do the job, they need to use the so-called common grid model. Now, we do have already a common grid model based on flat files. They're called UCT-DEF format. And what it is, I mean, most of you are probably, or some of you are at-class engineers, they will know what I'm saying. It's simply the nodal injections and withdrawals, topology of the grid, parameters of lines and transformers, and that's it. Then you run the base case load flow calculation, which is the basics for a plethora of other calculations and analysis you have to do in the operational planning. And after that, you have some remedial actions to apply or not. So in order to be able to do this, the TSO, this regional security coordinator, needs to have a proper format and the contents of the data. And this is where this catch with the common grid model comes in. Indeed, the old-fashioned flat files are really not useful today, which is why at ENTSO we run, I think it's one of the biggest IT projects in the history of European transmission, and it is called Common Grid Model Exchange Standard. The purpose and the work is about allowing the TSOs to exchange the data among themselves in the standardized, object-oriented way for all purposes and all time frames. For those of you who might remember telecom sector of the 80s and 90s, this would be comparable to the common information model development of telecom vendors in that time, which were supposed to allow exchange and management of data of different pieces of equipment, like cross-connects, add and drop multiplexers, etc. So we are doing the same thing today, except the size is a multiple order of magnitude bigger. The industry is, I would say, much more substantial for infrastructure and for supply of energy, and the problem is much more difficult. So to achieve or to have this common grid model for Austria, considering today that we are undergoing this so-called in German Energiewende with my predecessor just mentioned the myriads of small generation units, our government has just committed last year that we will have in Austria 9,000 megawatt solar generation and 12,000 megawatt solar generation, 9,000 wind. So it's a threefold wind and 6 times solar we have today by year 2030. So the business of the transmission system operator and operational planning has changed dramatically. You cannot model your network without having a close insight into the grids, the networks of the distribution system operators. And vice versa, we heard already the distribution system operators. They will not be able to do the job without knowing the bigger picture for them. And the bigger picture for them is what's going on in that part of transmission grid which affects me. Now, considering in Austria having 138 distribution system operators, of which 10 of them are directly connected to our transmission grid, and considering our roles that on one hand we are kind of insurance for them, that they can always get good voltage and frequency on the connection point, but on the other hand, the distribution system operators are the place where most of generation is coming tomorrow, if not already today from. We have chosen in Austria a way of implementing this legislation for data exchange, not to just clash the legislation on a table and say, you deliver this to us. No, we said, all right, let's sit together on a table, which is why I also put the logo of our association on my first slide, and let's see, what do you need from me? It's quite unusual, but we said, all right, you want to have the segment, the part of the transmission grid, which is around you, fine, you get it. And the same thing is, I want to get all the data from the I need all, not that I want it, I need all the data from the distribution level, because I'm not able to model my grid only with my few 380-220 kV stations. I really need to have 110 kV substations, because most of generation is connected there. And you know that you cannot model it just by some equivalents or some substitutes. So this is in a nutshell what this is all about. We started this development already 2 years ago, which is not, I would say, legally firm, because it will become legally firm only after we get the approval of regulators for this core, which I've shown you in a previous slide. So this document down there has been submitted by the transmission system operators to national regulators in September. The final approval is expecting before Christmas, and then we will have the formal legal basis for what I believe by that time we have already quite well agreed upon, namely this way from the DSO data for the forecast, for structural data, for reliability and so on, to the individual grid model of Austria, to building the common grid model with all our neighbors and enabling operational planning, which is really needed today, but even more tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very compact presentation. I would have lots of questions already, but are there any other people in the audience who would like to get some clarification on something we've seen on the slides or heard in the voiceover? No? If not, thank you very much. And I will immediately move to the next speaker in this session. That's Dr. Michael Merz, Managing Director at Ponton. And he will talk about two things. One is energy data exchange project here in Austria, and also about a project called Grid Chain, which talks about the DSO cooperation with regards to balancing. So, Mr. Merz, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of Österreichs Energie, the Energy Association. I'm myself from Pontong, and I will talk about two projects. One is already 6 years old, so one may not call it a project, but a running system, yeah, obviously. The other one is really a proof of concept, and both are about standardization and data interchange between DSOs and TSOs. We heard already about standardization as a key enabler for a smooth interoperability between system operators. And yes, if there's a lack of standardization, then we would need this, yeah, this monster plug, because if there is no standard, we would have a set of different data communication protocols, we would have a large set of business processes, and we would have a large set of different data formats which would need to be integrated. And in the worst case, everyone would need such an adapter to connect to the other market participants. So what we actually want instead of that is this. Yeah, it's I call it a yin-yang-yang. Yeah? So yin-yang-yang means a harmonization. And it also means, in the sense of interoperability, it also means standardization of three different parts. And these three different parts are data formats, yeah, that's the Ying part, the same data format. This is what the previous speaker already mentioned, yeah, agree on having exactly the same vocabulary when doing data integration. The second one is the Yang, which is the standard business process. It's very clear, if we don't behave the same way, we cannot really interact. That not only applies to system operators, but to everyone actually in every situation of life. So we need also a certain level of standardization here. But the third part is important, yeah. It's the Yang part, which is the same language as far as the data communication, the communication protocol is concerned. Yeah? And there are many standards out there on the internet where standardization groups end up with a document of 600 pages which define the data format, which define the business process. And then on page 599, there's just one paragraph, and this paragraph says, yeah, and for the communication, for the transfer of the data, maybe FTP may be used as a communication protocol, full stop. And that is not enough, yeah, because we are talking here about encryption of data, we are talking about authentication of data, we are talking about end-to-end security, we are talking about non-repudiation. The sender wants to be really safe that the data has received the document, the content in the correct form. The receiver wants to be safe that it really comes from the right sender, and so on and so on. If we standardize that and if we harmonize that in an efficient way, then we can achieve a data integration infrastructure which brings down cost and which also brings down the barriers for new parties to join. And now I'm coming to, this one first is just to relate that with the architecture model, the smart grid architecture model used in Europe. Yeah, there's the business layer, there's the functional layer, and the information layer, and the yin-yang-yang fits accordingly. So now about the EDA project, yeah, which is Energy Data Exchange in Austria. The goal of the EDA project is to achieve a data integration infrastructure that harmonizes the supplier switching process for gas and for power. And in the case of EDA, it was at Österreichs Energie, a standardization group, which agreed exactly on the yin-yang-yang of data communication. The processes to be supported were just one at the beginning. Yeah? It was data communication. That was in the year 2012, quite long ago already. We rolled out the infrastructure by in such a way that no central data hub is used for forwarding the data between the different market roles. And the market roles are DSOs and suppliers, and from after some years, additional market roles joined. But basically at the beginning for supplier switching, it was DSOs and suppliers. And once it was rolled out as a peer-to-peer, end-to-end communication infrastructure, and once the supplier switching process worked well, it was clear we have an infrastructure now which could be used also for other processes. So invoice data exchange was the next one which was included. Yeah, that took place in the year 2014. Then later, metadata was exchanged over the EDA infrastructure, and so on. So it was exactly the same infrastructure reused for different types of interoperability and different types of data interchange. And this is how it looks like. If you look at it from above, yeah, we have this, this red line, and the red line is the standardized part. That's within the red line, the yin yang yang applies. Within the red line, the same data communication protocol is used, which is called EBXML, or specifically EBMS20. Yeah? It's like AS4, it's a data communication standard, full stop. Yeah? And it is used exactly by everyone in exactly the same way. And then we have the data format, which was designed by the Austrian consortium for the supplier switching process as it was practiced then in Austria. And we have the business process, again, designed also by Österreichs Energie. To connect to this system, communication link, a communication adapter is required, but this adapter speaks only just one language. It's not the monster adapter, it's an adapter that speaks this EBXML protocol, and it's end-to-end. Yeah? So the only centralized components that we need is a certification authority in order to authenticate the participants such that both sides know who exactly the other side is they are talking to, and to help encrypting data. We also brought down the entry barrier for small participants because, as already said, there are about 130 DSOs in Austria. They're a very small one. The smallest one has just 60 metering points, 60, yeah. The regulation required everyone to participate in exactly the same supplier switching process. So be it Wiener Netze as the largest one with about 1 million metering points, down to the smallest one with just 60. So to integrate also them, there are some integrators or concentrators on the right side, which map other communication protocols like email to this EBXML protocol. There are many service providers, IT service providers, who provide software as a service systems in order to integrate small participants who just use a web-based application for their grid management applications or for their supplier applications, and they just use one of these connectors to integrate with the rest of the world. At the end, in Austria, we have about 150,000 transmissions per day under the supplier switching process. The supplier switching process in most cases takes less than a minute because it is just the IT systems being connected here on the DSO and on the supplier side. So this is fully automated. Getting connected and being part of the EDA infrastructure and reaching the others who participate takes about 24 hours. You need to install a certificate, you need to connect to the system, and then it takes some time until your profile data as a new participant is downloaded by every other party, and then you can talk to every one of the other participants. So this is how the overall setup looks like of the EDA infrastructure. And just to show the supplier switching process, what happens here, for example, is that a new supplier contacts the DSO in order to request the connection data, the meter data. So we have a request here going from the supplier to the DSO. This is routed through a third party who does some logging and monitoring on behalf of the regulator. This is a regulated process, which is the APCS in Austria. And then comes the response back again in a peer-to-peer way from the DSO to the APCS, and again from the APCS to the supplier. If we, for example, have an invoice data exchange, this is a not regulated process that would not go through the APCS. That would be directly end-to-end between the DSO, for example, and the supplier. And then, of course, another process step is between the new supplier and the old supplier. That's the same again. The new supplier contacts the old supplier regarding contract information of the client, again using the APCS as a hop. And the answer again comes back to the new supplier. The data exchanged contains GDPR relevant data, yeah, so data privacy applies here, but whoever talks to whoever else, as we use end-to-end encryption, the documents are encrypted from the sending organization to the receiving organization. And even in this case, which goes through the APCS, remains encrypted. So they are just interested in the data flow, but not in the data content. So that is without a data hub. It's fully decentralized. And after this started 6 years ago, with having the infrastructure available, it was in October 2013, so a bit more than 5 years ago, that the supplier switching process was running. 4 years ago, the invoice data exchange process, then the metadata exchange process, and now the DSOs and the suppliers and further third parties are discussing new standards for the tenant, the supply of the electricity supply for tenants, and the required data processing around that process, and also APG, as the Austrian TSO, has joined the EDA consortium, which means that there's a bunch of new processes which again take place between TSOs and DSOs, and which will also be tackled in the future. So other processes again are, for example, nomination of electricity and also nomination to the gas TSOs. So this is growing as more and more processes are put on top of that. I think the main feature here is it's fully decentralized. There is no central data hub needed, and also the cost of a central data hub is just saved here. Lessons learned, always standardize. Yeah? Standardize as far as you can. Any deviation of a standard is somehow breaks down the system or slows down the system. Be strict if you standardize. Try to decentralize. It's not bad to decentralize, only if it is really required to centralize because it's required by the regulator, or it's an inherent centralized process, then you may centralize. Otherwise, you can be happy with decentralization. The other parts I said already, most of the data communication takes place fully automatic and very fast. I'm myself from Germany. I'm not very familiar with the details of the German supplier switching process. The only thing I've heard is that it's quite difficult and less standardized. Yeah? And I'm quite happy to have contributed to this standard called EDA. Now for something completely different. That is a process which is running, which is live for 6 years. The next one is called Grid Chain. And as the name already allures, there's something with chain in it, so it's a blockchain-based process. And our idea was, is there a useful way to apply blockchain technology in the grid operation space? Yeah? So we hear about blockchain when it is about decentralized trading, about prosumer-consumer, and so on. There are hundreds of projects across Europe, more or less successful. But the idea here was, does it make sense to apply also blockchain for grid-specific processes? And let me explain something which you probably all know. This is the balancing process, which is driven by the TSO. And today there are aggregators, yeah, who supply balancing power to the TSO. So the TSO requests or activates balancing power from the aggregator. The aggregator in turn requests balancing power from smaller generators who are scattered across the country. They sit everywhere from a local grid to the next higher grid levels. They provide maybe 100 kilowatt or half a megawatt or 10 megawatt, so different volumes as far as capacity is concerned. And if such a request goes out to the different generators, the following may happen. If you look at the left side, the grid is colored in red because we have a congestion situation here. Yeah? 5 megawatt is requested, but the grid doesn't allow for 5 megawatt. Usually, and today in Austria, this won't be the case because the grid is dimensioned in such a way that there's enough capacity. But if we talk about the increase of renewable production, as it was said already, which will be, what was it, 16-fold for solar power? Oh, 6-fold, okay. So we may end up in a situation that we also see in Germany, where the activation of 5 megawatt of balancing power may cause a problem for the DSO, because if the DSO doesn't know about that, if we talk about tertiary balancing power, this happens 15 minutes in advance, but the TSO only sees the physical ramp go up, and when the physical ramps go up, the only chance is for the DSO to curtail this, yeah, in the last second. This is very unfortunate for the DSO, but also the operator of the generator is unhappy, the aggregator is unhappy, and of course the TSO is unhappy as well. So we don't have a harmonization, we don't have a synchronization between a TSO-driven process and a DSO-driven process here. And what is the actual problem? The actual problem is that the participants in these processes only talk point-to-point to each other, one-to-one. Yeah? The TSO talks one-to-one to the aggregator to the generators, the ramp goes up, if you like, the DSO sees that the generator, that the ramp goes up, and the curtailment is another one-to-one process. This is a classical way of data communication. Now we look at blockchain, and before we go to the blockchain-based process, what is the main feature of blockchain? To cut it really short, I mean, I could talk 3 hours about that, but the 1-minute version is, it is a one-to-N communication. If I use whatever, Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever kind of blockchain, I create a transaction, I publish this transaction into the blockchain, and everyone who is connected can see my transaction. That's one of the core features. So it's a one-to-N communication. And what we did here was to radically apply blockchain technology as the foundation for the integration and data communication. And what happens here is that the TSO requests balancing power. So content-wise, process-wise, still the same. But the request is not sent to the aggregator, it's just written to the blockchain and everyone can listen. So the aggregator is the intended receiver, but the others listen. I mean, this is not relevant for the DSO at the moment, but the next step is relevant. Now comes the aggregator and in turn requests balancing power from the generators. And now the DSO may already listen, and the next step now is that this generator on the left side confirms to the aggregator, yes, I can provide the 5 megawatt that you have requested. And now it's getting critical. Now the DSO who is connected to the blockchain is just informed because this transaction is also forwarded to the left DSO, and then the DSO can send a curtail flag. Yeah? We call it Sperrflag in German. So a curtail flag. And which doesn't mean that the DSO curtails physically, but it's just a warning actually that this won't work. And this is a warning to the generator and specifically also to the aggregator. Don't touch my local grid XYZ. It is overloaded. So next step is that the aggregator now tries to get the balancing power from another alternative generator, and this might be a pump storage facility in Tyrolia, which has, I always call that Draghi, yeah, because they have endless resources. So they may jump in and provide this requested balancing power. So switching from one-to-one to one-to-N, I think makes sense here. And this is what we did as a proof of concept process. Of course, this is not live. If we go live, there are some other things to be solved. Yeah? We now have a transparency issue probably, because we are fully transparent, everyone to everyone. This may need to be restricted a little bit again, but it was interesting to learn how different communication patterns, like one-to-one communication, as it is also used for EDA, and one-to-N communication, serve in different ways the different kind of processes. And I think this is highly interesting and attractive when we look at the future, where interoperability is key for TSOs, for DSOs, for TSO-DSO integration, and also for the other market participants. I think that's it. Okay, thank you. Oh, are there any questions possibly?
Thank you. How advanced is this use of blockchain today? Is it already used, or is it a project?
No, as I said, this is a proof of concept project, but the technology that we use is also applied exactly in the same way in the EnerChain project, which comes from the wholesale trading space. And there, live trading took already place above of that infrastructure.
Hello. Is the technology or the system is the blockchain agnostic, so you can use different types of blockchain? For example, the Energy Web Foundation is working on one, and then several other providers. So can you switch between different chain providers in the future with that system?
No, for this project, I mean, that was with limited resources, and we just decided to use one technology. I think to have I think what you are looking at, this is a kind of abstraction layer, yeah, which allows to design the business process above, and then having different mappings to existing technologies. I think that is really difficult at the moment because standardization and technological development in this blockchain space is still quite fast and quite surprising. I think we have to abstract away a little bit here and just use one technology under the assumption maybe to later on have such an independence layer. Yeah? Right, because this is still a moving target as far as the technology itself is concerned.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. You created some questions and debate, and I think we'll come back to this. But thank you very much for now. Very good. We're keeping a good pace. Hopefully that will help you to stay awake. I think we're coming at a critical moment where you may start to feel the lunch catching up on you. So we've heard a lot of things about the importance of data and cooperation between TSOs, DSOs. Now let's have a look at some of the more technical considerations for data handling. And I'd like to invite Martin Runge from Siemens to the stage to come and talk about how to make use of data from different sources, and also questions like where to store all that data. So, Martin, the floor is yours.
So, thanks a lot, Mr. Chairman. In contrast to Roberto, I'm not very long at the Utility Week, and I was not aware that the screen is so small. So I have slides with me. The second thing is hopefully my voice is not breaking down, but as backup power is always needed in the energy utility industry, I have a colleague with me, so for apologies if I need to step down because I catched up a cold, he will step in on the fly, but I try to make it. So. I was asked to give a little bit of presentation about how can this started. It's simply tap or. Yeah, good. Thanks. No. Need to go full in? Good. Now here we go. To talk about technologies for asset management, how we deal with that, what we offer and what we see in the market here. I mean, this is not new. We all know that the number of devices is increasing, and we're discussing and debating that now for years. Most of the time, everybody is mixing it up that it's all about new devices. No, it's not, because in the energy and utility industry, we have really heavy, very expensive equipment. And I think Dr. Daika Patanovic said it already. This was the contrast to the telecom industry. So it's also about retrofitting, and the number of communication devices being able to transmit data is growing very, very fast, not only because we install new generation type of devices, but also because we install retrofitting devices, meaning we add communication pieces to already existing infrastructure. A good example for that is the whole secondary protection devices out in the grid field. Yeah? This is definitely leading to a massive increase of data, and with an increase of data, it's always the question how to communicate, what are the standards for communication, and also where to store the data. I mean, we got the perspective from the European Union before, the European digital initiatives. I would like to debate a little bit on that, because from my point of view, this is very, very important where we store the data, especially from a European perspective. So if we dig a little bit deeper into the asset management, it's always needed to ask ourselves why we want to use data for asset management and what is our goal behind that. I see four main drivers for intelligent asset management. Definitely one driven from the commercial point of view is the increased asset lifetime to get the most out of the money we originally spent. In terms of security of supply, it's definitely the maximized availability of the assets, keeping our grids up and running. This is also a priority for us. Optimized processes, really finding data, how we can, for example, learn from our protection devices, make variable settings and protection devices that we can overload some lines for some time in order to optimize our processes, for example, or new value streams we have not even thought of in the meantime. So in some cases we always talk about new data of IoT connectivity, new under brackets, because what I said before, a lot of the data are already there. We're simply not making use of it. So some control centers use the existing data only up to 5%, what could potentially be done. So our approach is definitely that we go out and try to retrofit as much as possible of our existing devices out there. This is really needed to protect the investments of our customers, and I see that also our competitors are doing more or less the same. And I think this is needed from a market perspective. The goal is definitely that we go for a potential data usage of 100% of what is installed out there. And for us, it's a priority that we go for open standards. So we try to retrofit most of our devices following OPC UA PubSub protocol standards, which is an open industry standard, no proprietary stuff that one is locked in one vendor's tool chain or device chains, because this doesn't make a lot of sense, because most of our customers have devices, certainly from several different vendors installed. This is extremely needed. And making use of the data of the installed assets as well as external data, weather forecast, etc. This is the base for data discovery and analytics. So what could be potentially analytics use cases? It ranges normally from detect grid anomalies, fault detection, but also pattern recognition. We might also think about pattern recognition coming from a non-operative point of view, trying to detect malicious behavior. We're always talking about cybersecurity, that somebody is logging in from the outside, but malicious behavior could also be happen internally. We had discussions with some customers. They are afraid of people being forced in their own organization to do some things. And intelligent systems could definitely also help preventing things like that. Asset monitoring and predictive maintenance might be other things we can look for. So this is what we do on the device layer, trying to retrofit, trying to go for open standards. The next step is for us that we also thought about really operating and developing a cloud-based IoT operating system. This was how we called it. We called it MindSphere, where we definitely bring everything up from the lowest level, from the connectivity, following the open standards, really providing IoT gateways where we can collect the data and where we can bring up the data to the MindSphere cloud-based infrastructure, where the data are hosted and where the data are stored. On the very top level, it's all about the application. So there are some applications which are already ready to run, but a lot of the applications we normally develop together with our customers. because there is not one catch-it-all application which is fitting all different kind of markets and all different infrastructure setups and all different specific needs of our customers. So, what is definitely needed in terms of cybersecurity is a secure onboarding process, where we definitely follow the industry standards are based on certificates. So we model the data models out there, so we create some kind of a digital twin in the system on the left side, and then a certificate is invoked, and then we onboard and install and connect the devices. Yeah? So it's definitely needed that every device is having a unique identifier and a certification within the system, that we know what is out there and that we can collect definitely the data. This process needs to be automated and needs to be as easy as possible as hooking up an iPhone device as a best practice model from a different industry. So all of our steps we do is here summarized. Step 1, enable the connectivity, make the onboarding, making the retrofit, following open standards, connect to a storage layer, may it be cloud, in some cases also needed to be on-premise. And step 3 is then running data-driven services or really going after the application. Yeah? Because it's not about collecting data, it's really about getting the value out of the data and identifying what the value potentially could be. So what we do, we created some kind of an application center, we call it MindSphere Application Center, where we together with our customers try to dig in some test data with them and find the value of their data, and also using the experience we had from our past experiences to see what could potentially be done. The interesting part is we really created here a way that we structure workshops and that we also mix the teams, because what is obvious that you need a lot more people involved to have more or less an out-of-the-box view. It's not enough that you have people from one department. It's definitely needed that you have people from different departments having the different views and bringing in the technical experience as well as the business background, for example. Yeah? And only if we mix people from different areas, the value is really unlocked and we have totally different results out of that. We're now doing that since 2 years and the experience is very positive towards that approach. So it means that our journey is that we shape digitalization together with our customers, really focusing on the needs, going into joint exploration workshops, trying to find out what is the value, how the application needs to be built, that we unlock the value, and then it's decided if this application remains only with the customer or if we bring it up as a standardized offering for the global market. This is definitely also up to the customer, what the customer wants to see, if he wants to participate together with other customers in a broader global technology roadmap or not. So this is how a joint workshop looks like. We created some relaxing places where we run it together with our customers. We bring our own experts, customers bringing their experts, and this is normally ranging from 1 to 2 or 3 days, not more, as a starting point, and then you focus on the results, what you really want to follow up. Yeah? And there are also people engaged and can do a rapid prototyping that one can really see what is the result out of some test data. Yeah? Because we need to make sure that it's tangible, what is the value coming out of data in a very short period of time. Now coming a little bit to the storage. Now we have made the first step. What are we doing with retrofitting? Where do we get the data? That we follow open standards, and that we have these 3 layers: connectivity, storage, where we store the data, and building applications making sense. Now looking a little bit at technical architectures. I hear a lot in the discussion between, we want to have it on premise because it's highly secure, or we want to have it in the cloud. I think this is substantially a very short-cutted discussion because technology is evolving and we need to understand that we will see hybrid scenarios. Yeah? And meaning on-premise being in the data center of our customers, this is the past. Public cloud is now what is an upcoming trend, but there are several steps in between. There could be a public cloud on-premise where a customer says, I'm not operating the system, it's still in my data center, but somebody else is running and patching the system for me. For some smaller customers, it's definitely something you might look for if you don't have the capacity and the know-how in managing the system by yourself. Or you simply want to get rid of your data center and you go to one of the big infrastructure as a service providers and you host your applications in that. To some extent, it's a cloud, but it's a cloud you manage by your own. or a private hosted cloud with some data center operators who operate the cloud in their data centers. So this is a hybrid world, and we need to live with the fact that our data are not centrally stored in the future on one place. There might be some data we have on premise, there might be some data we have in a public cloud, there might be some data we have with other market players together in different cloud, and we need to manage that equilibrium of that hybrid world. Now coming to the European data guidelines, I think it's of fundamental interest that there is clear regulation that data can float around inside Europe freely. Definitely, yeah. But from my point of view, it also needs to be understood that we need the European Commission to help all of the countries and all of the vendors to make sure that we have a legislation in place that this data is not landing outside of the European Union out of a sudden. And I'm not talking about that this is transferred outside intentionally. It might be that it's a backup, it's a shadow, or somewhere else. And increasingly, it will get harder to distinguish if data we generate and collect are important and considered as critical for national infrastructure. Why I see that? I mean, we all know that there have been some cybersecurity incidents in the past, and there was a customer who broadcasted on YouTube a video of his infrastructure and the new substation equipment which have been installed there. Nice, nobody would have ever thought that this is an event of a national critical infrastructure. But if you go on YouTube and you see the equipment which is installed there, and if the devices are not securely patched, you open a door for a cybersecurity attack. Would have everybody considered before that this is an incident of national critical infrastructure? No, mostly not. If we collect data from all of our devices, that we see what is the firmware status, and if everything is patched, getting that file, you definitely know where's the entry door. So it's not only about managing the grid and really the heavy operational data, also some at the first glimpse data which might not be seen critical could potentially be critical from a cybersecurity perspective. So I think this is where we need to understand a little bit more what is definitely critical, what is not critical, and how we deal with the criticality of the data in the future. Now coming to some examples. I go briefly to that. An example for optimized processes is an application we developed for patch management and protection setting monitoring for secondary electrical equipment. What do we do here? We address definitely here the grid operator's question and the overall question peace of mind. How can we fulfill legal, regulatory, cybersecurity requirements? Can we manage all of our cybersecurity status of all of our devices, not only from one vendor, but from different vendors at the same time? So we developed an application for that we really document and get transparency of the installed base, and that we use also our CERT database from our own security experts to give the right understanding what devices need to be patched, and also provide the patches as possible, definitely for our own equipment and also from other vendors' equipments, if we can do that. So the benefit is definitely that the cybersecurity always is updated. Yeah? Is there any status where one can say, I have a cybersecure operation? No, this is an ongoing effort. Yeah? The only answer to the question, what can I do to be cybersecurity? Cybersecure, the right answer is all you can do at the very moment. Yeah? This is definitely not a static process. Yeah? And it's also the question of responsibility. With a reasonable effort, you need to do everything you can do to make your system cybersecure, and you need to continue doing so. So, an example for increased asset lifetime, transparency on asset health status. We are using more data, as I said before. So we retrofitted our protection devices here, which is a Cyprotec line, and our power quality advisors, and we use and pulse and stream that data up to get definitely new sets of data we can analyze and then make this data available for operations. Good example is here going for dynamic line rating processes for the operation of a grid. Maximize the availability of assets. Here this is definitely about predictive maintenance for primary assets. So these are the normal questions. Am I doing the right thing at the right time? How do I extend the lifetime of my assets? And how long will the condition of the devices can be updated in the future? And the most important question, when at the very latest moment do I need to replace my assets in order to keep my grid operations up and running. So we created here an application, we call it Reliability Centered Asset Management. This is an app we created on the base of data, and we provide to our customers for that undertaking. I'm not going into the detail here because the screen is anyway not good enough that I can do that here. So, new value streams, connected batteries. Yeah? We all know that the major thing on the battery is definitely the degradation of the batteries itself. Yeah? So we need to balance the positive aspects of the business cases of batteries in the grid with the degradation effects of not properly managing the battery. So it's needed that we get all the data necessary from big battery units, have an application on that, and optimize the operations of the battery, keeping the degradation aspects and the gain aspects on the other side, whatever that might be in mind. So IoT ecosystem, it's our main topic, that we are not only generating applications by our own, but that we contribute infrastructure which can be used from anybody out there on the sole discretion of our customers, building applications and building value add. So what we see here is more or less an overview of the infrastructure we had. The first generation was standard cabling, second generation was point-to-point connection. The third generation have been digital station passes, roughly around 2004. And the concept we are now following is the digital substation 4.0. And this is about introducing a process bus in the substations, and wherever we can, IoT connectivity, if a customer is willing to use that. With that, all of our devices which will be rolled out in the future, and all of the devices we can retrofit, we will do. But the customers decide what they do with the data first. Second, it's also up to the customers to decide who should help them making use of the data. Don't necessarily need to be Siemens. And what I see, I think also the competition is following that. Yeah? It's around the power of choice, whether you talk with your vendor to get the application or you bring somebody else on board. But I think this is a very fair approach to the market at the very end. Good. These have been some considerations for asset management and what we do in that area, and some thoughts around where to store the data and what are the security aspects of that. Any questions? Sorry, I think I took your point.
Yeah, thanks for those interesting informations. One quick question on, you talked about the predictive maintenance approach that you could serve with having device connected to the MindSphere. But do you also have evaluation or analysis models on the data that is sent by a substation, for example, so that you can really give the customer advice on actions to be taken if the substation calls a failure on the transformer or whatever, transformer?
So I think one question is addressed to if it's running only in the MindSphere. No, it's not only running in MindSphere. I mean, it's one way of hosting it in the cloud environment. We can also do it somewhere else. I mean, yes, this is definitely the target, that we try to get more data from the equipment, that we can give advices to extend the availability of the assets. One development we see is the whole aspect of machine learning and artificial intelligence, that we get somewhere a historic mindset and mix artificial intelligence with historic informations and make it available already to the operators in real time. Because understanding what is the probability in having a failure of infrastructure if we overload something to avoid an outage somewhere else, and having machine learning algorithms in the background providing operators with a different view or a second opinion, safe to do so or not, I think this is the future. But we are here, honestly, at the very early beginning, what technology will enable.
Thank you. As soon as you have first results, let us know on your websites. We're really searching for predictive maintenance analysis software, so it would be great.
But software is on that already out there in the market, existing. Yeah?
Hello. How many TSOs and DSOs in the world today have the capacity to feed MindSphere with data with the good level of quality and with the good data streams to be able to use then the applications that you develop and that run based on the data hosted on MindSphere?
I mean, this is what I said before. Yeah? I mean, it's not a very standardized process. You cannot go out there and say, hey guys, I have MindSphere and this is the data and this is how the data looks like and you need to provide the data in that form and that quality. This is simply not working out. Yeah? Because even if you look at the infrastructure, historic developed totally different country standards sometimes. It's an approach where we try to be as close as possible to our customers to understand the actual situation, making use of all the things we already learned, providing support and making use of the data which is there. I think it's better to make use of existing data and not being catched up in the process of cleaning data, trying to collect more and more data, pushing up the quality, because at the end it's also about getting bang for the buck. Yeah? If you try to do some things and you're not able to provide concrete, actionable results on short run, it doesn't make sense for anybody. So what you're talking about might be a future to be scenario where everything is standardized and there are some applications so standardized that everybody could potentially support. But I think Dr. Kapitanovic already alluded on that. Potential use cases where standardized data will be coming up more and more, and this is then contributed to joint platforms wherever they might be.
Thank you very much, Martin, and well done on keeping the voice. So well done. Round of applause for Martin. Thanks. Moving swiftly on, and we're moving physically north. We're going to listen to Toni Laakso from. He's the CEO of Lempäälän Energia. From Finland, and he's going to talk about energy self-sufficient business ecosystem enabled by microgrid. And I understand somewhere in the course of his presentation he will get some support from the technology provider, from Jussi Mentinen, from Siemens. But first, let me open the floor to Toni. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome to hear about our Lempäälä project in Finland. Okay. The next. Okay, now the. Okay. So the Lempäälä project in Finland. Target is provide information of leading energy community projects in the Nordic and maybe under Europe. Lempäälä itself is municipality of owners 100% of Lempäälä Lämpö and Lempäälä Heat, and the Lempäälä Energy is our production company. Lempäälä is the project name of the Lempäälä Energy Community. Today's agenda for our presentation introduce for Finland and the Lempäälä project, how to tackle the challenge, solutions and summary. We want to be the municipality who said yes for the business, and we want to solve it for the energy problem on the Marjamäki Business Park. So here you see the area, and the Lempäälä is nearby to Tampere and 170 kilometers of Helsinki. And we have the big mall for the Ida Park, where is the visitor for 7 million people a year. As you see, here is the available plots, where is the business we can make for big challenges. policy change for truck driving for to get rid of oil and reduce use of natural gas. And great value using existing gas of district heating pipelines in Marjamäki. In addition, aims to devote a role of gas infrastructure of energy transition. As weather conditions are also changing and more power supply trading on storm. Also see branding opportunity through sustainability. Lemene is received government spearhead project 8 2017. The main goal, the building energy self-sufficient industrial and business district. Smart grid control is the big thing. Fruitful environment for our team. And now the Jussi could tell about a little bit for the smart grid.
Thanks, Toni, and I will continue from here. And starting from the fruitful environment for R&D itself at Lempäälä, this was a key topic for us also to engage with this project. There is a really good environment with businesses, so with Lempäälä Energy, also university is very close by in Tampere University, where also many study programs are ongoing. Also the target to test on a power to gas kind of environment. What is the Lempäälä or Lemene project? What is the smart grid system itself? It is consisting of solar power plants of 4 megawatts, so 2 times 2 megawatts solution, gas engines of 8 megawatts, 6 times 6 gas engines, fuel cells, small scale, but anyway a very important tryout. E-storages or battery storages of 2 systems, 2 megawatt systems each. And also, of course, the main grid connection on 20 kV level. For the Lemene project itself, it has started already a long time ago, actually 2015, and also when the idea generated by the municipality head and started to discuss that we have to do something differently, there was also university programs, development projects started called ProSem and Heila, which you can also find in internet. ProSem was just lately also finalized, so there is a study result also existing. 2016, Lemene project got the funding from ministry, and the project kickoff was 2017. Now on 2018 and 19, there is a design and delivery phase, and live operation will be on 2019. As Toni said in the beginning, I think this is the only one project in Europe which is a grid scale, a microgrid, and this kind of an energy community case. Now also we are starting together with the university and the other stakeholders in the area a ProSem++ project, where of course everybody is welcome to join. So how did we start to go for this project? Well, how to create a self-sufficient business district that provides the highest reliable power to customers and maximizing the share of renewable energy, and how to comply this kind of a tight time schedule which also ministry is giving, that you have to be ending to get the funding, you have to be ending the project in 2019 to get the funding also for the project itself. We started, of course, when we engaged with Toni also very in the beginning, we said from Siemens, of course we can do it big. We can do everything for you, no problem. We can deliver all cables, everything, but and also the whole project. But also we were quite humble and say, but we are willing to build up this case together with you. So we want to learn, and I think this is also a learning process for the company, for Lempäälä Energy also itself. So we started to build up the concept together. We started to look on different details and really to look on automation concept. We took our consulting colleagues also globally engaged to look on the latest technologies, what is existing, because the target is also not to develop totally new products and solutions, but to utilize the ones what we have already existing. So taking really the lessons learned from current stage and then putting in the implementation of a new type of a solution. Of course, one of the key part from Siemens side is the microgrid controller, microgrid management, because to be a manager of a smart energy community kind of topic, you really have to have a robust system which is running the whole operations, who is forecasting the operations for the future and providing the solid backbone for the whole operations itself. We have talked about a lot of data in the beginning of the session here, and in the data itself, I think this is also key of the running energy community. So we collect the data, we run the operations very automatically, but at the same time we transfer the data to the transmission system operator like Fingrid to provide flexibility on the power network. So Lempäälä will be one part of the virtual power plant, will be operated by virtual power plant, and will provide flexible power to the network operator. And this will be, of course, additional revenue also coming to the energy community, which is then also helping everybody to get cheaper prices, also then being self-sufficient from the energy sources. You have solar, you have gas, and you have a heating network, district heating network, where you can also store energy. So I think very intelligent project, combining different kind of energy sources together, and driving that data to the cloud as a virtual power plant was also Martin was telling in the previous presentation. Overall, to be successful in this kind of a project, it requires partners, and I think here also Lempäälä has been doing very great job of getting different companies together, not only contracting Siemens to build up turnkey solution. Of course, this would have been also fun, but at the same time now we are able to learn the different interfaces, how the data is exchanged between gas engines, how the system is operated with two different suppliers of energy storage solutions, and all the solar panels, all the solar inverters also. So there is a lot of challenges ahead, absolutely, but at the same time it's also quite fun to learn about this kind of integration. And of course, we had a nice chat also on a briefing session before coming here, that how the DSO is seeing also this kind of a system in the network. So because the system is built on the existing DSO, on top of existing DSO network, and then is connected to Fingrid system. So there is a lot of challenges. There is a lot of challenges to be solved. This project still requires an additional approval from the government level, but this is also on the process currently. But we are solving now the problems of the Europe, and of course we are very much welcoming everybody to Lempäälä to hear what we have had challenges, where we are going, what kind of things we are doing, and there is an open ecosystem with the municipality. As Toni said, this municipality of Lempäälä is saying yes. They say yes to everything, and also university, which is very flexible, is also positioning themselves as a smart energy ecosystem of Europe, and I think there is a very agile network existing. Also industries, so there is already existing businesses, but of course new businesses are welcome, and of course vendors, many vendors in the game. As said, operations is to be started in summer 2019. We are not yet there. We are building the system and on the delivery phase, and if you want to continue the discussion, we are welcoming you to the Siemens booth on quite close by. And if there is any questions, of course, we can try to answer some of them now.
Are there any questions, burning questions on this particular project?
And of course, happy to come next year to explain about details of the project. How did it really go?
Very good. I think it's well noted. Thank you very much. All right. We stay in the north of Europe. You may have noticed we've kind of moved from south to north, from the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, up to Austria and the German-speaking world to Scandinavia. We're moving west to Norway in more particular. And I'm very happy to introduce Guro Grøterud, pardon my Norwegian, on the last kind of presentation before we go into the panel discussion. Guro is head of retail electricity market section at the Norwegian NRA. And she will talk about the CER advice on data management for well-functioning retail markets. So we'll be hearing a little bit about the data management, the management of customer data, but also kind of what are the expected results of that data management. And there's going to be some interesting examples from the Norwegian experience. So Guro, you have the floor.
So, thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you very much for your invitation. We've been talking a lot about data this afternoon. Very interesting presentations indeed. One thing that was mentioned in the introduction in this morning was the customer, and I think it may be time to go a little bit back to the customer data. So that is what I'm going to talk about. I have actually been asked to present the CER, which is the Council of European Energy Regulators, their advice on data management for better retail market functioning. This is a paper that was published in 2016, and I would also like to show you a couple of slides with some examples from Norway. So in many European countries now, we are about to install or prepare the installation of smart meters, which will generate a whole new world of customer data for the use of the DSOs, the customers, the suppliers, and probably also third parties. And alongside this, in several countries, one have developed or will develop new customer data management models. And the trend here is centralization. The level of centralization is not the same in all countries, but this is clearly a trend. I saw this on an Austrian presentation right away. CER's advice on data management for better retail market functioning was written in this context and gives some guidelines on the processes by which data is sourced, validated, stored, protected, and processed, and the basis on which it can be accessed by the customer. And by customer data, we mean both the point of delivery, the user and contract data, such as name and address, supplier, etc., and also, of course, the metering data, which is the huge mass of this. The choice of the model for data management may induce both risks and opportunities. Among others, I would like to stress the possibility for quicker supplier switches, which was also mentioned earlier today, and which it enhances the customer experience. The customer empowerment because of the access to more information and the possibility for third parties to develop new services based on the customer's data, thus generating value for customers. However, it is important to pay attention to costs. The data management must be cost efficient, and in particular, unreasonable costs for third parties may act as a barrier for these to come in and create new services. And last but not least, the opportunities rely on accessing the data fast enough and of course with a quality which is sufficient. Other opportunities are that with smart meters, the network operators will have access to more detailed customer data that may be used for enhanced grid management and investment. And the data can be the source of innovation on the market side, delivering more choice and better solutions for the customers. So, to the advice of the CEER. The CEER developed 7 recommendations. And the first is that metadata must be protected by appropriate security and privacy measures. And moreover, of course, customers must be able to control the access to the data, in particular for third-party access. Of course, DSOs and suppliers should get the access to the data of the customers when needed. Oops. Just now we have a problem. There it goes. We also developed several principles on the transparency, which of course is a very important principle. And the following information should be publicly available for all customers. These are the rights, which data exists and what they're used for, how and how long data is stored, how to access or give access to the data, and when one may access the disaggregated data. This is of course necessary in order for the customers to understand what they actually have and how they can actually need it. And I would also say that this is very important in order to create the trust between the customer and the DSO or other data hub. Moreover, relevant bodies are to take active steps to build this customer confidence in sharing customer metadata. And last, the costs and benefits of harmonizing the standard of a data format, not only on national but also on regional level. Oops, sorry. Inaccuracies in the data must, of course, be communicated and addressed. And the customer should have access to his own metering data. And last but not least, the data management model should not give undue preference to one stakeholder over another. And this is in order to support an efficient and competitive market. And it should be said that in the follow-up paper of this, where SEER explored 8 examples of future data management models in Europe, it showed that in these 8 European models, the principles of ownership, data control, and customer rights are rather well supported. However, none of the countries had investigated and established regional standards. So that is maybe the principle that was the most difficult to address, at this stage at least. And marketplace and customer access to data was a bit varying from model to model. That is something that one will need to work more with. So now I'm changing my hats from CEER representative to my ordinary job, which is to work at the Norwegian regulator. And in Norway, we are about to finalize a mandatory smart meter rollout. And that is by the end of the year that it is to be finalized. And I think it goes rather well, so I'm very happy about that. Some of the opportunities that we see is that all customers will receive correct metering and invoicing by the DSOs, but also from their suppliers. Till now it has been rather accurate, depending on whether the customer reads the meter or not. Very often it's not. We also see that the DSOs can use the data for enhanced grid management and investment. For instance, we see that some DSOs have been, instead of investing in new components in the grid, they have been interchanging existing components because that some components had actually been very much over-dimensioned. This is just one example of what is possible to do with more data. And last but not least, the suppliers and third parties may develop new services based on our data. Another possibility that we are investigating is that the DSO may use the metering data for new tariff models, incentivizing the customers to shift their load so that I think in Norway we see, as most of the rest of Europe, that the capacity need of the grid is growing much faster than the actual volume of consumption, which makes the grid extremely or more and more expensive per kilowatt hour that you actually use. But now that we meter exactly how and when the consumers use the energy, it will be possible to compensate them when they use it in the way that we like, same thing all the time, and sanction or penalize them or make them pay a little bit more when they use it when like we don't like them to do it, which is very much when they come home and plug in the car and start to make dinner and nothing in the night. And of course, with this kind of system, this kind of tariffs, this could contribute to a more efficient use of the grid, and that is returned to the customers through all over lower grid tariffs. And the meters are also equipped with a standardized local interface through which the customer may receive near to real-time data. And we, the regulator, has charged the national TSO of developing LHub. And LHub is the place where all the metering data will be stored, both from customers, from regular customers and other customers and producers, all metering data in the same hub. In the old model for exchanging customer data, the DSOs kept the metering data and shared it with all the different suppliers. We have a lot of DSOs in Norway. I don't think that all countries in Europe will be so impressed when I say that we have 123 DSOs, but don't remember that we are 5 million persons, so that's a lot of DSOs anyway. And we also have some 140 power suppliers, so that means a lot of interfaces if you want the suppliers to get the data from the DSO. So we decided that the TSO was to develop a national hub in which all these data were to be stored, and then the supplier gets the data from the hub, and so does the DSO, and gives it to the hub, of course. This will facilitate market processes and supplier switches. And moreover, in the future, the hub may be developed further for other duties, such as grid tariff calculation for each customer and for consumption profiling. And possibly more and more. Now we are just developing it, but I think the most exciting phase will come when we have the data and when we have the hub. And just like for the meters, we are now in the very last developing period, and we are expecting the hub to start up in February. So it's a very exciting digitalization autumn we have in Norway. Just to make clear how the customer data is shared. This is how it will be in a couple of months. The data is collected in the smart meter, of course. And the hourly data are sent to the DSO, which sends it further to the data hub, where the data are stored for 3 years. The customer will access the data through his supplier, which has the obligation to share the customer data with the customer, and of course has the right to access the data. However, the customer can also get his hourly data and share them with third parties, but only if only after the customer has confirmed that this third party should access his data, because these data are, of course, to be protected by all kind of rules of privacy, because they are personal. So that's for the hourly data. And as concerned the local standards interface, the customer may use it To begin with, it's always closed. It's mute as a standard, and that's a question of privacy by design. But of course, it's the customer can open it by asking the DSO to activate it, and we are working on how the customer may also open it by asking his power supplier or any other third parties to open this so that it will be easily accessible. Yes, so these are the first steps of what we're doing. But as I said, the really exciting period is when we have all this data, and then we will see how they are used by the customers, suppliers, third parties, and DSO. So that's what we are eager to see next year, and I see that a lot of people have already thought of it, and that's very good. Last point, because data is great, and it's absolutely fantastic what we think we can do with them now, and I think there will be a lot of things in the future, but one must not forget that when you create data, you also create new vulnerabilities, new risks. And it is therefore of utmost importance that the cybersecurity is taken care of. In Norway, it is the DSO that is in charge of the cybersecurity and data protection in the smart meters and the systems around them. And the national TSO, which is in charge of cybersecurity and data protection in LHub, which is the data hub. And the regulator supervises the security level and provides guidance to both DSOs and the TSO when the LHub is finished. We may also sanction the grid operators, both DSOs and TSOs, if the security level is not sufficient. And we do coordinate with other authorities when necessary, such as National Security Authority, authorities in charge with security of supply, and authority of privacy and data protection. Moreover, we have yearly cybersecurity workshops with the DSOs, academics, and other authorities, and also, like some other regulators in Norway, we have now employed staff with a competency on cybersecurity in order to be able to follow up the DSOs and the TSO on this important point. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for another interesting presentation, and you did very well keeping the audience in their seats at the end of a long session already. Are there any questions from the floor? No? I have one particular question on the first part of your presentation regarding the CER advice. Could you say a few words about what the status of that advice is and what's happening next, or what's supposed to happen next with it?
Well, what has already been done, and that was a request from the consumer. What's the name of it? The London Forum, the Consumer Conference. It was to check whether the current developments that are being done in order to develop hubs or other systems that we have seen today are actually applying these advices. And as we see that some advices are possible to apply and some are less, so this is something that I think we should possibly try to follow and maybe investigate the reasons.
Thank you very much. I have, according to the program, we've gone through the presentations, and I think we had a very broad spectrum that we covered. In the program, we've foreseen a panel discussion now. I just want to make a check, also in fairness to the speakers. Can I see a show of hands in terms of the number of people who are interested in staying on for the next half an hour or so, and avoid the panel speaking to a half-empty seating arrangement. Who is still on for further discussions and debate, so that the speakers know that there's people listening to them? Okay, that's good enough. That's we have a sufficient number of people staying on, so I'm counting on you staying on. If not, otherwise we'll meet each other later this conference, I'm sure. So I would like to invite the speakers to join me here on stage, in the comfortable chairs, to have some further discussion. While they make their way to the stage, maybe I can ask you in the audience, first of all, did it kind of respond to your expectations, the session? Is there anything in particular that you found noteworthy coming out of the presentation so far? Is there anybody who would like to share their view, because you've been listening for a long time? No, not yet? You still need to heat up a bit? Okay. Maybe to introduce the discussion and summarize what I've heard. I've heard a lot of different things, but if I can summarize them in some buzzwords, I think what I've been hearing is think big, think European. Cooperation has been a buzzword in many of the presentations. The focus on system approach was basically a given for everybody. The one part that I liked in particular was the yin yang yang for harmonization. Well done on that one. But also, I think on data, I heard some interesting points regarding the access, the management, and the storage. And I think we may want to get back to that question right here and right now. So that was my takeaway. The speakers have an opportunity to respond to what they have heard today. And I've prepared a couple of questions just to kind of guide the debate. So what I'm hearing is that data is very much seen by many of the speakers as an opportunity, as an important tool to manage the energy transition to the new energy reality. The DSOs are perhaps the most hesitant. I think there I've heard more of a approach that data can be very challenging for them as one of the many challenges they face. I'm also hearing in several presentations that technology is there to deal with it. And so one of my questions to the panel is, kind of what is still missing if the technology is there, if data is an important or essential tool to make the system happen. What is missing? Is it policy, standards, or is it a question of culture? Or is it simply a question of time for the projects and the experiences to come through? So that was one of my questions that I'm left with after this session. So maybe the panel would like to elaborate on that. And so maybe to dig into the first question, what is it that DSOs and TSOs for that matter, in your view, should be doing when it comes to the data management and the data storage issues? So that was one of the starting points for this debate. Anybody who would like to? Sorry. Any views on that particular point? Kind of what is it that you, with experience working with the operators, they should be doing, need to be doing, and perhaps in certain cases are already doing? Who would like to take the first stab at that question? No?
I mean, maybe I've not gotten your question right. Yeah? I mean, you asked me or asked what is missing. I really don't think that I can address that question properly, yeah, because I don't think that something is missing. It's always the point from what perspective you're looking at it. Yeah, from a pure technology perspective, it's always the case that you have mature technologies where everybody feels comfortable using it, and I mean there was the debate about data exchange a lot. The technology is mature here, so we know what it is. The other technologies which are not so mature, if you think about artificial intelligence. I always comparing that to a self-driving car. Yeah? I mean, this technology is also at the very early beginning, and nobody wants to be the one who is hitting the wall. And therefore, technologies which might not be that mature, yes, they might take a little bit more time that we safely want to implement them in an environment which is really very, very vulnerable to disturbances. Yeah? So my take is, or my reply to your answer is, what's missing cannot be addressed without specific what area you want to ask from a technology perspective, mature or not mature.
Maybe from the data policy, from the data regulation point of view, I want to bring on the table a new instrument that is the Public Sector Information Directive. And I don't know if you have listened about this directive, but I think it's quite interesting. Because this directive, what it says, is that if you are using a public service, certain data should be given because it's a public service behind that. So you cannot say, I'm using this public service, but all the data that is related with that, I don't want to disclose. Take an example that is very easy to follow. Imagine that you have a very hard disease, a big cancer, and you go to a public hospital and you are treated with the more advanced medicines and chemicals and machines and whatever is there. The public has the right that the data that is collected on your case is stored, of course anonymized, but is stored, is kept, and is used for improving the cancer treatment for other people in the society. So if you go to a public hospital, you cannot say, oh yeah, I want the benefits of not paying for this advanced treatment, but oh no, me, that is personal data, and I don't want any data on me to be kept. And now it comes to the energy sector. If we believe that these smart meters are a key piece for saving us of social problems, for instance, global warming, we need to reduce CO2 emissions, we need this data, not for the benefit of the DSO to bill us better, but we need this data because we believe that there is a social benefit behind that, then nobody could say, I don't want that this data is made publicly available. And that is what we are doing now with this PSI directive. And I think and the energy sector is there now, considered as one of these sectors that data should be taken and should be disclosed. If you want the benefit of being in the social system, you have to give this data for social use, anonymize and whatever. I mean, like the case on the hospital, the energy is the same. There is a social benefit. If we believe on this social benefit, then people should give this data. Now, this is a proposal that the Commission wrote in May this year, and now is under debate in Council and Parliament. The Parliament is very supportive to that, so it is probably very clear that the proposal will go ahead. In the Council, there is more, diverse opinions, but Parliament is very supportive, and there is nuances, but there is nobody that says that the energy sector is not a sector of public interest and then should be subject to the PSI directive. And that is a novelty, because like the GDPR application this year have a strong work in everybody of you that you are in the energy sector. If this directive goes ahead next year like it is now, that will have also a strong impact on the energy sector. I don't know if it's true, but I have listened there on the corridors that I think a DSO of France or something like that, they were trying to, they asked permission to the customers to collect data for profiling, and it seems that only the 3% of the guys said, yes, I want to contribute my data. That is incredible. So, I don't know, it's food for thought, think a bit, and if this thing can come, I think can change the landscape of data handling in the energy sector.
Yeah, coming to your question, what is missing? I would rephrase that and maybe say, or ask, what is the biggest challenge out of the different possible things to be tackled when doing a data integration project, and apart from the yin yang yang, there's maybe a yung, and that is governance. Yeah, that is beyond the technical level, and then it's getting difficult. Yeah, so you have a group. You possibly have a very heterogeneous group, and you need to get everyone on board and be in the boat and be part of the project. And that has to do with the contractual level, that has to do with the decision-making process, and so on and so on. And I think that is very difficult because it cannot be enforced, it cannot be required from the participants. It is indeed a cultural thing, and I think in the case of our project it worked very well because the DSOs in Austria, they are used to cooperate very smoothly. This is what I can say coming from Germany. And so I think that is the difficult part, yeah. And the question is how to align all these different roles, market roles, and participants. I don't have an answer for that. I can only assess, or we can only assess. In this case, it worked. In another case, it didn't work or struggled.
Of course, data has never saved anybody from anything, but I think it's very important to use the data in the right way. And there I agree with the European Commission that if it is necessary that the DSO should access the data if it is to be using it in a good way in order, for instance, to integrate more renewables and in a less expensive way. And I think that in many countries in Europe, we are now creating the new data, at least as concerns the customer meter data. So maybe it's not that strange that they are not fully used yet, but I think that it's very important that the regulations give the right incentives to the DSOs to use the data in an efficient way, and possibly also, when necessary, give them some frames to experience and take some risks in order to not to do just business as usual and use the data for invoicing, but to go a little step longer.
Very good. The question about data usage and data storage, for me raises one of the questions that I think Martin raised on where to store the data and avoid that it's getting outside. Be interesting to hear also maybe from the European Commission, kind of how do you see that that particular question on where to store the data, because I think it's a very pertinent question, and that's probably need some further debate and thoughts, but it's quite an essential question for the functioning of an energy system that's much more based on data flows than it has been in the past.
Yeah, for the data, we have also another Commission instrument. This one is called the Free Flow of Data Initiative. This one is called like that. And what this instrument says is that in the European Union, it could not be borders for data exchange. If a country wants that certain data is stored physically on the country, they need to give very strong security, national security elements in order to say, look, that is for our national security, that needs to be here in Austria and cannot be stored anywhere else. If that's not the case, all of the data could be stored anywhere in the European Union. Why we have built this piece of legislation? We have built it in order to give you more choice on service providers. We know that there is cloud service providers, and this idea you can use a service provider that has a service on another country. And we have done that also in order to facilitate that companies that are operating in more than one European country can have the data flowing from the different services without being resident on a certain place. Of course, that opens the door of what Martin was saying in the presentation, that yes, that's fine, provided that the data stays in the European Union. But what happens if the data goes to outside the European Union? Maybe just as a backup, because we will not want to say that my central system is there, but why not as a backup elsewhere? The idea of the European Commission on this piece of legislation is that is based on the free flow of movement of services, of goods, and of people. Then we put data at the same level. We say, if people can flow inside the Schengen zone without any passport, so data should do the same on this place. That means if you go and you put the data outside there, like when you go outside the European Union traveling, you have to show your passport. If you put the data outside, you need to say clearly where you put and to show a passport for the data moving away. So that is a bit the basic principle that we have for that. Now, I think that does not solve the question, because you will ask me, yes, but on the free flow of people, there is a control border, and there is the police, and there is authorities. Who is there to control this data? But so far, it's not clear that is a really strong control to control that the data do not go elsewhere. But I think we will learn with the practice. If we see that the data are flowing away, and we need to implement this type of controls, we will do them. But let's from the moment see the free flow of data, how it works. If it's self-regulated, better than better. If we need to control, then we will have to do.
So I think there are several aspects to that. Yeah? The first aspect is that my personal expectation would be from European Commission perspective that there's a regulation in place. If somebody is operating here cloud infrastructure in Europe, that you make sure that all of the European data guidelines are really fulfilled. And if somebody is violating them and is bringing backup or cache data outside of the European Union, that there are severe penalties up to the fact that they need to stop operation here. Yeah? This is my personal expectation, because if this is something we want to do here, we need to follow that up. And I think industry and both utility and vendors industry isolated are maybe too small to debate that with dominant players from US or somewhere else. Yeah? This is simply a question of size, where European Union could be the right scale. Regarding the free flow of data, the only thing I'm worried about is the definition of sensitive critical data. Yeah? Because I think it's definitely up to a transmission or distribution system operator to decide what data are critical for their operations and what they don't want to go out. I mean, assuming one transmission operator is issuing a tender for a second generation outsourcing project for a data center, it cannot be that in the tender this company is releasing, for example, I want to keep my operations in Austria, that this is then seen from a European tender perspective as discriminatory, because they say you're not allowed to write, it's only allowed to have the operation in Austria because you need to prove that the data is really national critical infrastructure. I think if it's getting that far, I think I see it from a different perspective. It should enable cross-border data transfer, and it should allow that an Austrian company, for example, is storing data in France, Spain, Germany, but it should not be an obligation, and it should also not bring up the right to call for a discriminatory status in a tender procedure.
Yeah, like the regulation is now. As I said, there is no controls in place because we need to see what happens. We cannot put the share in front of the bulls. Let's see what happens. And then on the free flow of data, we say clearly that the digital single market is a European market. So we want that when a company has a call for tender, is open to European companies. We cannot say, you cannot say it should be an Austrian company that has, is the normal call for tenders. I mean, it's no difference if there is for a cloud service than if there is for another thing. You should be open. We are in a digital single market, it's a European market, and you cannot put barriers on this market. But that has nothing to do with the cloud or the data. That is the European single market in general. On the data center location. Okay, location. No, the location, again, if you want to locate the data in a particular country, you need to justify that is your government of the country, is not the company, that has to say this data has to stay here for national security reasons. That is the country that has to define that.
I'm aware that Mr. Kapitanovic needs to leave shortly, and I want to make sure that he has an opportunity to also contribute to the debate, either to the discussion we just had, or before you arrived, I also asked the panel if there's any particular observations from discussions or presentations before that you would like to comment on. So I'll give you an open mic.
It's very kind of you. I mean, again, coming back to the practice, much less the framework. First, just a joke maybe, my IT head, the head of IT at APG is my most beloved enemy or my most annoying friend because indeed it's never enough. I'm just a user. So the control center, the infrastructure for operating the system is badly affected if anything happens wrongly. And whatever we do, we are aware it's not enough on all time frames, real-time, operational planning, anything. So this is, in principle, we are not just aware of this, and we are investing a hell of a lot of money and human resources and other resources, and we know it's not sufficient. But what we are doing in practice, European transmission system operators at the moment, we are rolling out the new, completely new wide area infrastructure based on TCP/IP for all time frames, for real-time, operational planning, data exchange, etc. We have already the existing one, which is mostly almost in our hands, but in certain security checks and so on, it detected on one hand the reasons to improve it, and on the other hand the bandwidth is not sufficient for what we are doing. As you can imagine, in the object-oriented world, the data quantity grows exponentially. So this is the network, this is the IT network based on simply TCP/IP with many hundreds of private routers, very high-end quality products of a telecom vendor, where all infrastructure, including the bandwidth, including everything, will be only in the hands of TSOs with no firewalls, with nothing. There will be absolutely no connection to the outer world. And this is going to be used not for a data center, but maybe to call it data landscape. I don't know if this word is correct, because we have indeed a very distributed kind of a database. In my simplistic world, I call it database. It's called differently. It's called operational planning data environment, and it's running on this new grid infrastructure, network infrastructure, and it's going to become operational in the next 2 or 3 years. It is going to be the backbone of all data exchanges and all data communication in the Europe transmission industry for all time frames. And I can tell you also finally, which even the regulators are absolutely aware of, and they are supporting us here, it will cost us a lot of money, but it will provide this, at last, what money can buy, certainty that you are safe and secure in your data world. Yep.
Thank you for that insight. Now, you've agreed to stay, you've listened long enough. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to hear from the panel? I mean, you have a distinguished panel here. I would say make use of it. Is there anything that we haven't dealt with, a particular question that you would like to bring up before we start moving towards the closing of the session? No, all very happy with that. Then maybe I'll turn the question to the panel, kind of starting to move towards a closure for some final statements to wrap things up. So we were talking about today about the new challenges for network operators and how can improved data treatment and analytics help. As I said before, I think I'm hearing that from most of the presentations, data is key and extremely helpful to operate the electricity system. And so I think that's a clear answer. There's lots of experiences to be had. There's still lots of projects ongoing and approaches under consideration. Blockchain being one that was mentioned here. So I think that's interesting. From looking back at what you've heard, what we've discussed, what's the key takeaway for you from this session, or a key question that still needs to be elaborated going forward? So I give you a bit two options, so to speak, to reply to that. And you can be very brief. I don't think we need to be very long, but maybe I'll start here and I'll work my way to the end of the line.
Well, it's the practical need and pragmatic applicability. You do what you need with as much perfection as you can, more or less. But again, this is from the perspective of a practitioner.
I think I would coincide with the statement.
From my side, I'm very happy of what I learned on these presentations today, and I think the use of data is well advanced in the energy sector. That is the proof of what I have seen today here. I mean, it's not people speaking about the thing. We have seen concrete projects. I think that is very important, and not research projects. Because, proof of concept and lab, I don't know what that, yes, that is years and years that we have seen these things. But I think today we have seen really that data is an asset of the utilities, and the utilities have this vision. So for me, that is very, very important. But I think what is important is to think already on the next step. That is what I said, to think big, to think European. And let me say one thing. For instance, look, for this artificial intelligence that my colleagues were talking to you, and that is the future and whatever. When you are having these algorithms that they are based on deep learning, you need a huge quantity of data, huge. And one utility alone, even if it's a big utility with I don't know how many smart meters, is not enough for this data, make these algorithms to learn. And think a bit of Google and these kind of things. Why Google is so good? Because it has millions and millions of users. So if you want to have this artificial intelligence, these deep learning algorithms and whatever, you need to think big. You need to go to another scale. And then I think the answer is very clear here. And of course, I'm thinking at home. So go European. I think that is the message to pass. I mean, very good on the use of data. I have seen more than what I was thinking before coming here, but that is just the beginning. So think already on the next step.
So if there's a person maybe 25 years old and maybe just having finished the master's thesis, and if that person asks me, what should I do for the rest of my life as far as my profession is concerned, and what gives me the safety to do this job until I'm going to be retired in probably 40 years' time? What would I recommend that person? Doing data in energy, yeah? So this is probably a really long-term task for every one of us.
Yeah, I think it has been a very interesting day. I'm also very eager to see how data will be used in the future, and although that's an answer to Roberto, who asked me who told me that the regulators should be aware of the possibility in technology, and yes, he's right, but as a regulator I need to be technology neutral. However, I think it's absolutely easy to say that those who are able to process data in the best way are the winners of tomorrow, and that's both for suppliers, third parties, and DSOs. So I'm eager to see that, and don't forget the cybersecurity, of course.
Very good. Thank you very much for wrapping that up. I would say let's give the panel and the speakers a big round of applause, because they did a great job. So thank you to all of you for being very cooperative, also in the run-up to this. So that was much appreciated. It was a pleasure working with you. I'm just going to wrap it up here, and thank also you in the audience for having stuck it out with us until the very, very end. I think it was an interesting debate. It was a pleasure for us at T&D Europe to put this one together. I would also like to make a plug for another session that we're organizing on Thursday on something different, on the decentralization topic. So please check it out in the program. And if you have any questions regarding what we do at T&D Europe or how we can collaborate with you, don't hesitate to approach me or contact us via our website. And for now, I wish you a pleasant continuation of the day, and have a very good European Utility Week. Thank you very much.